In Venezuela, we also have massive protests against the leadership of Maduro, who won 11 months ago and has been in office. He, of course, was on the side of Hugo Chavez, who died. They had an election. It was very close, disputed, of course. All these elections are disputed. And Maduro has been cracking down on his opponents. Now his opponents are in the streets, and 5 people have died. In fact, let me quote Reuters for you. At least 5 people have died since protests turned violent last week, with scores injured and arrested. The demonstrators, mainly students, blame the government for violent crime, high inflation, shortages of many products, and alleged repression of opponents. That's why they're in the streets. And they have a case to make, actually. And they explain a little bit further here. In affluent East Caracas overnight, security forces fired tear gas and bullets, chasing youths who threw Molotov cocktails and blocked streets with burning trash. Here we go again with the Molotov cocktails. So, now, who's right, who's wrong? Once again, it's very difficult to determine, right? Maduro has arrested Leopoldo Lopez. He's the 42-year-old Harvard-educated leader of the opposition, and he's holding him in prison in Caracas, and he says that he is a murderer and a terrorist. Here we go again. Anyone who's opposed to the state, any state, is always a terrorist, right? And he says that's because he's egging on protests and getting people killed. Now let me show you one video here where it appears that it's not Lopez's side, but Maduro's side who's getting people killed, because it is the government forces that are actually shooting, and in this case, and fair warning, looks like killing one of the protesters. President Maduro says we cannot underestimate those fascist groups whose boss is behind bars, referring to Lopez. Now, of course, it was his guys that appeared to be killing the protesters there, and at least 4 of the protesters are dead now, it appears, because of the actions of the state, okay? He goes on to say, I'm not playing with democracy. I do not accept that they challenge the Venezuelan people and our constitution. Now, it does appear that he is playing with democracy. Yes, he won. Again, disputed elections. I have no idea whether that dispute is legitimate or illegitimate. You'd have to get knee-deep in the logistics of that vote, and obviously we're not qualified. I don't know if anyone is qualified to figure out whether there was fraud on either side of that election, but they were very close. But you are playing with democracy when you start shooting protesters. And I'm not the only one saying this. Amnesty International says that it smacks of a politically motivated attempt to silence dissent in the country. Human Rights Watch says Venezuela must avoid scapegoating political opponents. Maduro does not seem like he's in much mood to listen to those human rights groups. He threw out a couple of American diplomats saying that the Americans are responsible for this and that they might be trying to do a coup on his government, and he yelled, "Yankee, go home!" Okay, that's understandable. I'll tell you why that's understandable in a second. But then he turned to his own people and said about his opponents, not the Americans, his opponents, if you don't like Venezuela, leave. Well, I know that he's on the left. He's a socialist, right? And not like socialist like here in America, an actual socialist. But that sounds like a right-winger in this country. The right-wingers in America are the ones that say, oh, you don't like the U.S., leave. That's not what you say. That's what an authoritarian person says. It's not what you say in a democracy. Certainly if you're the head of that democracy, that's not what you say. It sounds a little like George W. Bush, and beyond, by the way. Okay. Now, on the other hand, it is true that in 2002, the U.S. did organize a coup of Hugo Chavez, who preceded Maduro, right? And who was on Maduro's side. And by the way, do you know how they did organize that coup? Well, they did street protests first. And the street protesters have not been clean-handed here either. Again, the Molotov cocktails, rushing into buildings, you know, and instigating violence in their own right sometimes. Not all of them, not by a long shot. There's very peaceful protests that you can see, marches, etc., part of democracy. But a radical group within the protest has been instigating some violence. And by the way, one of the guys who participated in that coup attempt in 2002 against Chavez was Lopez. He even helped to arrest one of Chavez's ministers. So nothing here is simple. Neither side has clean hands. Now, Lopez saying, oh, coup, street protests, I don't know, I have no idea what you're talking about. I wouldn't organize anything like that. Well, that doesn't make sense. It appears that you helped organize it before. On the other hand, calling him a terrorist, shooting at protesters, is not the right way to handle a democracy. And here's another instance of Maduro being wrong. When the press goes to cover it, well, he of course doesn't want pictures like this that you're seeing here, and video like this, with tanks in the streets, etc. So a CNN crew covering the anti-government demonstrators had its equipment taken away at gunpoint yesterday, according to CNN. Now, usually if you're taking away journalists' equipment at gunpoint, you're trying to hide something, okay? So no one's completely innocent on either side here in Venezuela, but is Maduro going too far in repressing press freedom, human rights, and protests? Absolutely, okay? No matter which side of the political spectrum you're on, you got to call it like it is. And in this case, even if he has a legitimate complaint, and we don't know if that's even true, he's clearly going too far.